this is what happened. Okay, so the plan today is, I guess, two things. So first, I want to just show people the documentation page because I think it's a good idea. If anyone says, hey, how do you use this, to just point them at a page and say, that's how you use it. Oh, God. Actually, no, I'll show you the easiest way to get it. So that's a dumb way to get there. Send them to this. Send them to geikimarcia.com, which redirects to the GitHub page. And then I redid the README, so if you look now, it actually looks kind of nice. Like, before it was a text file, but I found out you could do some Git markup to make it look like... I actually found out from this guy. Where is he? He's following us, I think. Or he starred us. This is the one that Veronica was talking about, Josh DeLue.
Oh yeah, the JavaScript solution.
He wrote some JavaScript stuff, and maybe we should talk to him and see if we can get some of his code stuff in here. That might be easy. But yeah, so I looked at his markdown or his README, and it looked very pretty. So it's like, oh, you could format these things. And I figured out what he did, and I did it to ours. So I would say the easiest way, if anyone wants to learn this, you say go to geikimarcia.com. That'll shoot them at this page. And then under how do I get started, this startingup.html is a link to our, basically the page with all the documentation on CogFog. So you just click that, and it opens this page, and you just say watch these videos in order. And it's basically all the training we've done. So it's like, here's what you need to install. Here's how you run for the first time. I even have links to like the pages. Here's how to run from any folder, and then here are these 2-hour videos of us just like. So it's like a very like, oh, I can get kind of dabble in this. Like, oh, this is a 5-minute video installing this. Like, now I want to learn what it does. It's a 2-hour video followed by 4 more 2-hour videos. So I mean, it's a lot of stuff, and I think it's a quick way to get them oriented and know what they're doing.
Yeah, you just give it to an RA, like do this over a week. Then they'll collect it.
Yeah, because right now it's basically been all word of mouth. Like people ask me, oh, what is this thing? And I say, who are you working with? And like, Courtney. I'm like, ask Courtney. And then Courtney kind of explained, and then they all like, oh, Veronica did a thing like that. And so it's all piecemeal right now. But this is a nice, send them here, at least to get a base, and then they can start doing more advanced stuff. Although ideally, this next Hangout here today is going to be a little more advanced. So that's pointing them at stuff, and now I think Tyson wants to show things, right, Tyson?
Yeah, so
Tyson's been busy, and here's what he's doing.
Is the screen on me now?
Yeah, right. Courtney, do you see? Oh,
sorry, I'm just joining right now. Okay, I'm joining. Sorry, guys.
Oh, that's fine. I'm just checking. Like.
Okay. Well, if you've downloaded the newest version, looks the same here, but I have this new thing which should help with making new trial types. So you go to code/trialtester.php, and you get a bit of a menu. And here is a list of all the trial types that you have.
You do this in half an hour?
About an hour. So, I mean, basically, it's just a select box and a lot of copy paste and login. But you see the box down here is actually an iframe that simply includes trial.php. So it runs exactly like trial.php will actually run for trial type.
Yeah.
So let's the trial type like, well, let's first do the cube. So how about apple and right. And pick trial type like coffee, and boom, you've got. This is actually what the trial looks like. And if you want to switch, let's make it a JLL.
And so this isn't hard-coded in the trial types. It's just scanning the trial types folder for what's in them?
Yep. Total scan. It simply runs the program as if you were in the middle of a trial. So this is like a very good representation of what you actually see. And the advantage here is if you're testing with normally up in an order file or procedure file, you have to constantly restart the program from the beginning. Here, if you want to change your queue, or I'm going to add more advanced features, let you add other columns and check your scoring and stuff. So it may be by the end of the weekend that'll be ready. But you can go here and you can check all that stuff without having to constantly update a bunch of Excel files inside the program.
Oh yeah, you didn't say that when you're broadcasting. This is all based off the newest version, so you should download the files because it's just stuff that person did this week.
Like an hour.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this pull request was accepted at like 3:05. So if your version is older than that, it won't have this feature. But if you got it, then expect it pretty much even with this in the next 7 days. So.
Beautiful.
So show people how they can mess with this. Like, so if you want to testing something, say you want to make a new file type, like you want to modify whatever study.
Let's go to the types, and we'll just copy and paste study. And we'll call this one study big. A big font size changes easy enough, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which of these does have to modify to make this work? I'll just do this.
So what Ty's doing is putting a box around whatever study usually does, and saying that box has 200% font size. So whatever's inside of that box.
Alright, so we can refresh here. Let's just look at the original setting down.
Appleman or
Batman and Robin.
Did you see Aaron's comment?
what's that?
The screen keeps changing every piece.
Oh, it's changing by Courtney because Courtney's mic's on.
Sorry.
Yeah, so the way the Hangout works. No, it's fine.
Sorry. Wait. So
If
these
you
are
mute
all.
your mic, there's an icon at the top when you move your mouse. It's a mute mic.
Sorry, okay.
Yeah, because whenever
There we go.
it's designed for people to distribute, so when the person talks, it's supposed to show their face. Okay, Aaron, is it? Let's see. Is it not doing that? Is it staying on?
We're
Testing?
good now. We're good now.
Aaron turned her mic back on, but no one has audio. Here, actually, I can plug one of my earphones in here and see what Aaron's saying.
You can scan the audience for us.
Yes, I will be the audience listener.
Alright, people can talk to Mikey now.
Okay, she said it's good now.
Okay, great. So, we're still looking at my screen, right? So,
Yeah, she said we're good.
oh, just as a side note, I added a new column called text, which basically is what procedure notes was sort of getting used for. So things like instruct or free recall prompts, you now put that stuff inside text. But I also added as an option that you can put text in every single trial type in some way, in some place. So here, I put a little da-na-na-na-na-na in the text, and that shows up in my study because there's an option there. If you leave it blank, that's fine.
I didn't know that started with a D.
Yeah.
I
I would start with the N. No.
Right, I think it does start with an N, but I figure, copyright infringement.
Yes.
I should change things. a
Very advanced copyright screening. That's a
little.
later Batman.
Right. So, yeah, the text you can put in most things and it'll show up, but if you leave it blank, there won't be any problems there. In fact, you don't even need a text column. If you don't even have the column, the program will just assume that you don't want any. It'll give you a bunch of blanks by default. And, yeah.
So show examples of stuff
So
that
here's
used to be
study
procedure notes. Oh yeah, we'll do this after.
Just, yeah, really quick. So here we see that I made a new trial type, and I made it bigger, and it shows up pretty much immediately here. So here's what the study looked like. I copied and pasted and doubled the size, and there's the new one. Pretty dynamic and easy to tinker around with, hopefully. And there'll be more advanced features for helping you get your scoring correct and stuff like that in the future as well.
Can I ask an annoying question because I was getting set up while you explain this?
Yes.
So to originally set this up, do you just put your whole trial types folder in this experiment?
No, this is so okay. So you can look here. I'll put my screen. So where am I? Oh, I just turn off his, and I think it goes to me. Infinity. Okay, so it should just work like this. So right now, web server is running, right? So I just have the newest version, right? Let me make sure I have it. Yeah, so I just downloaded the newest version. So I'm going to collector, which is my normal thing. Where is it? There it is. And you just go to code.
Okay.
Was it trial?
Tester with camel case.
Yeah, I assume.
Okay, so it's just within everything.
Yeah.
Just a couple new
Okay,
files for us to play with.
sorry.
Yeah, so anytime you create new trial types, they'll show up in this little pull-down list.
Just, refresh the page once you've made a new file. But then once you've done that, boom, pops up.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Okay, so Tyson has probably more stuff to
And I think Q just shows the Q, so the answer would need to show up here. Text might show up. I don't know if I put that in.
Let's see.
But like Instruct used to use procedure notes. If you look at that one.
Instruct. Well, I can just go back to your screen. I was just messing with it myself. So this is the feature I haven't even messed with because Tyson just, like you were saying, this is a feature that is 15 minutes old. So expect it to be 15 minutes old. Okay, so Tyson, show stuff where you change it to text and what.
Okay. Yeah. So if we look at JLL, if we give it a blank text, then it uses the same defaults as before. But I think if we add some new text now, like now you can get new text. So with a lot of things that had default messages, you can now overwrite them, and you don't have to copy and paste the whole trial type or tinker with the PHP if you're uncomfortable with that. You can just use the text column. And when you are trying to do things that have multiple text entries, they get separated by the pipe character. So here I set it up so that the JOL child type will use the first one as a header, which is why it's showing up bigger in blue, and then after that it's just normal p tags. An example of something that you definitely want more than one text entry is, I think, the liquor one that I set up. So you have your question on top, and then you have your left description and your right description. And so, yeah. And
If you had a third one, do a middle description.
yes, so if we place a middle in between left and right, there you go. So yeah, new feature of text is that it's used in a lot of the trial types now, and to separate it, just like we separate some other things, it's pipe delimited.
Yeah, and so this is in places where we used to use procedure notes, like instruction and all that stuff, and text will work the same as any other column. So if you call it like a JOL and a post trial, then you'd have post 1 text,
Absolutely.
or post 2 text, wherever level you're at.
Cool.
But this should make it a lot easier for people to, especially I didn't know Tyson was going to do this yet. But yeah, to test what you're doing, this is a really good way to like. I guess should we just start building trial types?
We can.
To show, because this will be really good to kind of show how you build them and how you can sort of start from one thing and start messing with it. And also they're simpler now. So remember before we always had to copy the reaction time one and all that stuff? That stuff is all gone, and now it's just automatically at the bottom.
Are we looking at my screen?
Yeah, we're still looking at your screen.
Okay, so yeah, this is, for example, this is the study trial type, and this is literally all the information you need. Basically, the only thing that you need to put in this file is what is actually going to be showing up in this file. So here, this comp time, that lets you set a default time so that if you enter computer as your timing, then it will use this, and then everything under here is just what's showing up. So you don't need to worry about reaction time measurements, for example, if you don't have the inputs for reaction time in here. But they're added to the page anyways, since this is getting included into trial.php. So you just sort of tinker with the stuff that you actually care about here, and it's just limited to that. It should be nice and simple for everybody.
Okay, so what could we make? Let's think of ideas. What are things we want to do? Or what if people wanted to do? Or what are things you had to make?
Something that comes to mind is like, so sometimes we want to take the response that they give us and we want that to become presented later on, or maybe that to be like a lore in a multiple choice test. So that could perhaps be like a complicated type of test.
Yeah, we can do that.
I don't know if we want to like dive in there or do something simpler, but
maybe that'll be later, because that'll be more because I think we'll have to show you PHP, which we've been hiding from you almost the entire time.
Right.
Is we've been hiding how the whole thing is running, and you don't have to know really how the whole thing runs. You have to know some basics of coding to be able to kind of pull things back up later that you're using in an earlier point. What is some of the stuff? Like taking, okay, so there's the one of just asking for 2 responses and labeling them.
Oh, yeah.
Like I know you've had like, what was the initial guess you gave? What was the correct answer?
And then just at some point, maybe we should explain the Tetris trial type, which is sort of old, but also
Oh,
got
yeah.
the upgrades to
They use that in like every single study.
Yeah, actually, do Tetris now
Do
because
Tetris.
everyone uses it.
Okay, so
Screen is hard to see for me, says Sharon.
I'm clicking on Tyson right now, and then it's much easier. Because otherwise we're like looking at your screen looking at Tyson.
Oh, wait,
No,
really?
It just got bad.
you guys can look at my screen even when Mikey's looking at his screen. Right?
Yeah, but I'm trying to think of what's going to be broadcast. Isn't it forcing?
Okay, yeah, now it just got weird. But
Okay, wait, let's see. I'm turning off Tyson and turn it back on. So is it still my screen looking at Tyson's screen, or is it just Tyson's screen?
it's your screen looking at Tyson. But when I go to Tyson, it's just what we want to see.
Okay, then maybe you guys just select Tyson, because I think what's happening is it's picking up because I'm talking that it should look at me,
Okay.
but what's getting recorded is the person
It's
I'm
Tyson.
clicking on.
Okay.
So it's like a weird disconnect between the experience each
I'll say
of us is
click
having.
on Tyson.
Yeah.
Alright, so I don't think that we have Tetris in any of our demo files, do we?
No, but I mean, it's a great chance to use it.
I wonder if I can just load Tetris through here. Cool. Okay, so,
Wow, did that actually work? That's crazy.
That's awesome.
but I'd rather show Tetris in the way that people are actually going to be using it. So let's just go ahead and put it in one of our. Maybe I did put it in one of our, all trials. Yes, so
Well, I mean, you can just make a new condition that's just Tetris.
I think it's in here though.
Oh yeah, since we've last been here, we showed that the files are CSV now, right?
Yeah, I think that was last week.
Okay.
So it's easier to open with Excel, but that does not mean that you should save it as an Excel file.
Oh yeah, Excel hates that you're not using Excel files, so it's constantly trying to tell you save it as an Excel file, but just say no, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, when it asks, say no every time.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so actually Tetris is at the end of condition 11. So if anyone wants to.
Magical, mythical condition.
Yeah, it's getting pretty unwieldy when you run it. Like, it generates so many output columns because every single thing that needs a weird output is like, oh, add those columns too.
Maybe we should replace these with names though.
Yeah, I'm thinking we might also, instead of having an all trials, have like a Tetris one, and it'll be like, here's the simplest case of Tetris, here's a more complicated Tetris.
Okay, so
I definitely think we can get rid of the first 5 conditions because I only run them the first time I show people how to use collector, and then never run them again.
these are a variety of things. We missed out on the chime because I don't have audio right now.
We missed the chime on that. Yeah, Bob Dylan. I should probably take out these copyrighted images from the default set of things, which is also another thing. If anyone knows of another distractor, I don't think we have the rights to this Tetris. I think I just downloaded it from a server, because the way it works, every single person who runs Tetris is pointing at cogfog.com a copy of Tetris I made
If you don't have
2 years
internet
ago.
connection, can you still use Tetris?
No.
Oh.
Because it's not JavaScript. It's a Flash thing that is running off of our server. So we should probably find
Because I know that
some
certain
open source
font sizes that
Tetris.
we use, we just import the font sizes, and if you don't have internet connection, then things look different all of a sudden. So
Yeah.
maybe we should download more of our stuff. Just because some of our experiments are on the internet.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's multiple choice pick. Notice that we've got the answers are actually corresponding to some of the answers you've seen so far. I'll go explain this a little bit more. We actually have a condition that just looks at multiple choice pick. But at the end of all these, we should have Tetris.
I like this condition. So many clicks.
Okay, so I set this Tetris to 30 seconds. It gives you 25 seconds, and at the end you'll have 5 seconds of saying, okay, wait while we load the experiment back up. But they're giving. Go ahead. The students that I've tested understand this right away, but when I give that to older adults, like 60 and above, they absolutely hate it and go into a rant about how evil video games are. So not recommended for that. And then just looking at the Twitter file. So it's just a matter of, it doesn't need an item, you can just put 0. The trial type is just called Tetris. You can put it to user timing, although a user time distractor seems a bit strange, but it's a possibility. They just get a little done button at the bottom. And that's about it. It's pretty simple, just Tetris and a timing.
Yeah, basically, it's the distractor we use for almost everything. When we need I would say when we need between 1 minute and 20 minutes of delay, people are pretty happy playing Tetris for that time.
Have you ever had a 20-minute Tetris?
I've had a 20-minute Tetris because I was waiting on an interim experiment between things, and I wasn't ready, so I just said, just play Tetris for 20 minutes. Didn't get one complaint. I just told people they'd be playing Tetris for a while, and they're like, all right, cool.
Well, that's not a bad game.
It's an excellent game.
All right, so then I think condition 10 has some of our multiple choice things. I recently redid that so that multiple choice, or MC Pick can use a settings column.
So show the simplest cases and then work your way up to some of the madness you've created.
Okay, right. Hopefully it goes in order of complexity. So I'll just load the first one. Okay, so we have a picture, and if you guys paid lots of attention before, you know that this is the correct answer.
Or if you're cultured.
Which I'm not. I wouldn't have known if it hadn't been for the All.
It's an excellent album.
It said MF Doom in the lower left-hand corner as well.
Yeah, it's also on the album cover.
So here in the settings,
He's a rapper who always raps with the mask on. It's great.
So in the settings, if you have a label for buttons, and then you can specify that you want it to put the answer on the screen. And here, the item is just number 8, which tells us to use that particular picture, and it comes with a particular answer. And this answer, since it has the $sign in front of it, it's dynamic. It means it's actually going to look up the current stimuli of that trial. So it should change as we move from item 8 to 9 to 10. So in this one, we've got a different button, and then finally a different button. Here we've got 3 buttons. That looks like sort of the same thing, where I've got button is the answer, but I've got multiple items defined here. So the items are 8, 9, and 10, and the way that multiple choice works is if you define multiple items, then the first one is treated as the one that's going to show up as a picture and as the one that's sort of the correct answer for whatever choice they pick for scoring. But you can use the rest for display purposes. So once again, we just do $sign answer, and it finds every answer, and it puts it on the screen. Then I've got some other settings. So here says shuffle. It means just don't do it in the order of 8, 9, and 10 necessarily. Mix that up. And then per row is 3. It just means put 3 per row, but that looks the same as it always would because there's only 3 here. And here, they're arranged a bit differently. So they're arranged vertically. That's just a setting I have where it just says per column is how I want to arrange it, with 3 per column. And then down here we actually see per row is 2. So we're going to get back to a horizontal arrangement, but only 2 per row. And that's what that looks like. If you tell it to do something like 3 per column, and you only have 7 buttons, then rather than going with 2 columns with 3 and 1 column with 1, it will try and distribute that out so that it's 1 column with 3 and then 2 columns with 2. So it'll try and push things up as it can, but it'll still sort of arrange going top left, down, and then scooting over columns. So you have some more control over how your buttons show up. You can use either this per row setting or this per column to limit how many in a row or a column. And then here we've got a couple more examples. So here we have multiple buttons, but we only have 1 item in here, and the way that we identify the rest of them is that we give the answer a range. So to give a range, you just square brackets after the $sign answer, and then it says 8 to 10, the double colon is our sort of range indicator. And that means that the first three options are going to be the MF Doom and other Talmud titles. And then I also have added this other group of buttons, which 2 to 7 is things like, from word pair and funny bone and stuff like that. And then you can shuffle in two different ways. You can have sort of like this example, where just you give it a set of buttons, and then if you just say shuffle by itself, it just means sort of shuffle everything that we've collected up there into our buttons so far. But if you say shuffle buttons, it just means shuffle these together and then shuffle these together, but don't intermix them. So sort of treating them as different blocks. So what that looks like is that we've got this other group of irrelevant answers in its own group here, and then our main answers are all in the first three options. And then the next one I think is vertically arranged. And so you can see that, we have the vertically arranged for the first three. And then it's also possible to do these sort of share groups. So like these are all called share B, and here we have the setting for share A. The reason that you might want to use a share group is basically what it does is it stores all the buttons it collects, and it lets you use those exact same buttons in the exact same order for multiple trials. So you might do that if you have a group of 12 artists, and you want to shuffle them, but then you don't want the artist shuffling in between every single picture that they're getting tested on. So whatever shuffle pattern it decides, stick with that one. So you sort of define it, which buttons you want to use, and tell it to shuffle, and then give it a share group, and then everything else that has the same share name, whether it's share A or share artists or share whatever title you want to give it, will use the same buttons. It won't necessarily use the same arrangement, so you can switch it to say that I only want 2 per row in this one, or I want to arrange this one vertically. But you can make sure that it uses the same buttons in the same order as before.
So here in, row 5 and row 6, you use share A both times.
Yeah, and then down here we use a group of share B. And these don't have to be consecutive, so like I've got share A's here, but then down here at the end I'll be using share A, and it can find the buttons.
And those would be exactly the same as we saw before.
Yeah, the same buttons in the same shuffle order, but again, you can change how you want to arrange them if you want to arrange them in different series of columns and rows, or vertically or horizontally. That's totally fine as well.
So what I'm seeing here in row 6, it uses different items than row 5 and 7. I think it's just a mistake. If 8, 9, 10, then 9, 9, 10.
Oh yeah, that should be 9, 8, 10.
Okay, so basically, what I'm trying to make the point is they have to all share the same items, right? Because
well, actually, in this example, 6 will be using the same as 5, because since it says share A and share A already exists, it'll be like, okay, we'll disregard all the work that we've done so far into collecting buttons, and instead go grab what share A was before. So like if I made this 2 through 6, it would totally ignore 2 through 6 coming from this one.
So priority.
So the correct answer would never be there then, right? In that case, if you change the number to 2 through 6, because
that's
the correct answer was 8, 9, 10. Okay.
So
you technically didn't even need as much in the settings column for 6 and 7, right? You could have just written share A per column and then share A per row.
The reason that you would want to put all of that information in every one is in case you're shuffling, you don't know necessarily which one's going to come first.
Yeah.
And then, of course, options like the per column or the per row aren't saved. But if you're absolutely certain that something is going to come before and you want to save some space in your file, it's totally fine to just say share A, because I know that A is already defined, and it'll use those buttons.
And for this scoring purpose, like Mikey said, like, the answer wouldn't be there. But it's always just scoring against its own answer later on.
So it's possible
this is like irrelevant.
Quiz, you can also do manual entry. So if you look down to row 12, we see that I've got entries here that do not have dollar signs in front of them. First, second, third, and then over here I've got a bunch of duplicates, and then duplicate 2. If we go down to where that one eventually is. Alright. So here, I wrote first, second, third, and that shows up literally. And then duplicates, it does not give duplicate buttons. So if you have a range of stimuli that has the same answer for 6 of them, but you have like 8 of these blocks, and you just want one answer from each of them, you can just define the entire range, and it will pull out the unique values and offer those as buttons. You don't have to worry about duplicates. The duplicates are already automatically removed.
So it doesn't matter if the same thing shows up 50 times. You're just like, well, just figure it out whatever buttons are in this thing I sent you.
Absolutely.
What a Tyson solution.
Yeah, I was about to say, I would have written it that way. I would have been like, those buttons would show up, and like, what do I do? Like, don't put duplicates.
And then one more thing is
The code is so much.
it is shuffling sort of, per trial, but if you refresh the page, there's no shuffle on this one. But it loads how it arranges the buttons into a session variable before it sends it to the screen. So if you refresh it, it won't be shuffling. So things will hopefully not be confusing if you're refreshing the page or moving between shared groups. Things should stay consistent.
And so then this, because it's in session, this stuff will work across multi-session experiments.
Yes, it will.
So in session 2, you can be like, give me the first set of buttons they saw on the first
Give me
day.
shared group A, and it'll work totally fine. So that's multiple choice buttons. I'll make a list of the exact settings, and you can look at that by looking at the comments at the top of the MC pick trial type, which is now a folder. You just click in the trial.php file inside that folder. But the new settings are buttons to give it a list of buttons, in which case you can put a $sign and use it to reference the stimuli. It doesn't necessarily have to be answer. This example, for example, uses the cue or uses the stimuli notes. Totally fine. It does have to be from the stimuli file, and like you can reference the order file. But if you're in the order file, telling it to indicate other things in the order file, you could just type it in as a literal entry without a $sign. Like if I wanted this to say MC pick, I'd just type that in, and then you can arrange it, limiting how many are in a row, how many are in a column, and telling the buttons to sort of fill up that grid vertically or horizontally, using vertical or horizontal as keywords.
And if you give it nothing, it'll just use what it did before, right? It'll just default to...
I think that'll actually be the next one. So we
Whatever's...
still have the option inside settings.php. So if you look in the experiment, look in settings. So we still have these collection of default buttons here. And they do get shuffled still automatically. And if you leave the settings blank or whatever settings you use, you don't end up giving it any buttons to use. Rather than having a trial type with no buttons, it will default to these buttons here. So that shows up like this. Which, yeah. Are we missing one?
No. 1, 2, 3 is missing. No, 3 is there. 3, 4, 5 is missing. 5 is missing. Look on this sheet; it might have just been deleted. This is like one of those visual search
right.
tasks.
So here, rather than cat 5, cat 6, we've got cat 6, cat 6, and we strip out the duplicates. So there, error check.
That was
We're
Tyson.
learning every step of the way.
Awesome.
All right, so that's the change to this. So if you have, so that means you can actually use multiple choice pick for things other than literally testing. Like you could make the button something yes, no, or you can sort of ask other questions. Like rather than what's the artist, you can ask like what category is this in. And you can do other sorts of things which you'd have to update the scoring or do that in Excel manually later.
Yeah.
But you have more variety in what you can do with MC Pick.
And so the scoring is still working as it's comparing. So whatever image is showing up, that image has an associated answer.
Yep.
And whatever the text on the buttons is. So in this case, it's impossible to get it right because the answer is Led Zeppelin. But
yes.
So I'd always miss it. So just again, the scoring works as always.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Doing the custom scoring.
Right.
Yeah, awesome. What other things have you done, Tyson? Tyson's been very busy this week. I've been getting pull requests at very weird times.
I mean, not just this week.
Yeah, but this week especially, I felt like there were a lot of like, this is ready, you got to accept this so I can do the next thing.
Yeah, I was pretty excited about some of the changes. I mean, this is pretty fun to make. If anyone gets interested in the PHP, MC Pick got a nice, awesome triangle of spaghetti code with no comments at all. So if you want to test your mettle with understanding, go ahead and take a peek at this fun stuff here, which is a lot of right here. This is the good part. Really inventive.
Oh, that's stuff that gives me headaches.
Yeah, the actual output's rather boring. It's just okay. Show the picture. If they have some text, go ahead and put that on the screen for them, and then give me the grid. But how we got that grid took a couple of steps.
But from the user perspective, it's pretty easy.
Right. Yeah. If you are not interested in code at all, there should still be some enormous flexibility that you have available to you.
Yeah. And also, so go back up to the input. Actually, I guess I could do it on my screen. Let's see, where is it? Switch it back here to. It should just go to me because it's the only microphone here. Okay, so if we go back to code, oops, not code, to experiment, procedure, which one is it? It's test MC. So the output on any of these, why is Excel lagging so much? Come on, Excel, you can do it. I believe in you.
Oh yeah, another thing about MCPick, it will record the buttons it used for that child type.
Oh, it gives you buttons? Okay.
Yeah.
But on these ones, right, where you're giving it multiple cells, like 8, 9, 10, in your Q and in your answer column, what's going to be reported is not just, so right now in the current version you give it 8 and the Q says this is whatever, the link to the image it used, and the answer is, the name of the painter or whatever the label is, the correct answer. If you give it 3 or 4, the Q will show you the first Q used, a pipe, the second Q used, a pipe, a third, so however many you put in here, it'll pipe separate all of them. So this, if you want, you just need to keep that in mind when you're thinking about what your output's going to be. And so it's just even more reason to label things correctly and not just to fall back on, I can filter by the Q or filter by something else.
Right, I can actually just show what that looks like here.
Yes, you should have the output on yours. So I can pop it over to you.
Yeah, I feel like the way that it's done in like the second set of trials makes more sense.
Yeah.
You need to like parse, but
So when you just have the one, is it on my screen?
Yeah, it should be on your screen, right?
Okay.
I think.
Then if you just have the one item, then under your stimuli queue, it's pretty simple. But it gets a little messier here, where this is where we had 3 items, and it's recording those into each of the stimuli columns, where it's just duplicating all of its answers. So if you're setting up your buttons, it's fine to do it this way, where I just say reference the answer, and that's all of my items. But if you want to clean up your output a little bit, doing it this way, looks a little bit nicer. You just sort of specify the exact range. Just as a quick note, so when it says answer 8 to 10, that doesn't mean like 8 to 10 of this range. So if you say that the Qs are items 2 through 6, give me answer 1 and 2, that's not going to work the way that you're expecting. This 8 to 10 is like row 8 to 10 in the stimuli file. So this 8 to 10 has nothing to do with these items. It happens to be that these 8s are the same thing, so that's why it works. But and then you just have this file column.
So if you wanted to get, like the way we've been using these like paintings, if you just wanted to say, okay, well, I want to see I know the painters exist from items 2 through 104. I could just say on every single MC pick, answers 2 through 104.
Yeah.
It'll scan all of them and then just pull out the unique painter names.
Yes, it will.
Okay.
And then you can shuffle that, give that a shared group so that it doesn't reshuffle over and over. And then I have this column here, response buttons, that happens for MC pick. It will tell you which buttons in what order it gave them as options. So if you're just sort of curious how your shufflings are working, you want to look at the order effects for buttons or something, the option exists here in this buttons column.
Yeah, and if you don't know, show them, do you know how to explode by pipe?
Right, okay.
It's an Excel thing that I think a lot of people don't know about, but it's pretty useful to... So right now this output looks a little messy, like, we've got a bunch of things I got to figure out.
So I'm just copying a row over here, and I'm going to transpose it. And if we take this data, text to columns, and we want to delimit it by the pipe character. If people are curious, that's on my keyboard, it's the uppercase of the backslash.
Yeah, so shift backslash
Yeah.
gives you a pipe. Even on the Mac, imagine that. Thanks a lot.
And then it split each of those things into their own little columns. So we've got the first image file and the answer, and I think these are notes or shuffle patterns or something. But text to column will help break these apart.
Yeah, so if you want to be able to say, like, what was button 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can just grab the buttons column and say text to data explode by pipes, and now you'll have everything in the first column. That's what the first button was. Everything in the next column is button 2. So it looks a little messy raw, but when Excel can do a lot of nice stuff for you to make it nice and easy to figure out whatever stuff you want to figure out. Okay, what else should we talk about?
I think those are the new ones I added.
Okay, so trial types. Should we start with like here's some PHP basics, or should we just start showing stuff?
PHP basics. Let's do some tutorials here.
Okay.
So
For one, show them the website that is the most useful website for learning PHP.
that would be this website. This is where you learn PHP.
Yes.
PHP. So I asked how do I delimit? It gave me PHP explode, which is the correct answer, and it tells you how to use it, and that's how you explode. So sort of, just like we did text to column in Excel, where we separated by the pipe character, there's a function that does that. So Googling your PHP questions is pretty good. PHP.net is the manual where you can get function definitions, exactly how to use it, and then most solutions to complicated problems can be found on Stack Overflow, which is right down here, like the third one. And a lot of people have good answers here. So using Google to find the correct Stack Overflow or PHP.net website will answer every single question you ever have about PHP.
Yeah, almost everything in PHP is... PHP.net is really good documentation on how anything works. Like if you're ever looking at the code and there's some function call that you don't understand, I would say the first thing to do is... Let's pull up Aptana. So let's just go to login and find something that looks weird. Come on, Aptana. Computer seems to be very slow today. Okay, so I'm going to go to something that has some code in it. So I was messing with jQuery. So probably the most complicated code file is login.php. You shouldn't have to mess with this that much at this point. It's mostly just going to do its own things. But if you're looking for like filter var, like what does that do? I would just copy that function. So this is the function call. We're saying this is getting into PHP basics already. Okay, so before we even, I should explain what a function is. So I have this nice little file that doesn't do, it's in the code folder called tinker.php. I literally just put it there so I can test PHP stuff when I want to say like, I have an idea and I think I can do it. So I like to do this. So code, and then I just go to, where's it? Tinker. There it is. So this is for me. Literally, so when you load it, it's a blank page because the page doesn't do anything right now. So it's a nice place for me to just inject PHP code and try stuff. So in PHP, $ means variable. So there's some variable. We want to hold something. So just name it var, and we'll set it equal to, in this case, a number. If you've ever done any sort of programming before, lots of languages focus on the type. Saying
Is it possible if you make the font size bigger?
Oh yeah, let me. Yes, awesome.
Probably should have been doing that on mine as well.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so this Tinker file does nothing. So var means we're setting, or not var, $ means it's some variable. So whenever you're looking at PHP, you see I'll $ something. So $ just denotes variables being declared, and then everything after is the name of the variable. And in PHP, there's not really types. So some languages will tell you have to set this is an integer, this is going to be a string. PHP is, the reason some programmers don't like it, and the reason I love it, is that you can just say, if I put it in quotes, that means it's a string. So Mikey, so var is equal to Mikey, or I can do var2 is equal to 10, that's a number. So this is just how you declare variables in PHP. So that's one of the first things you need to see. We do it all over the place, so that's just saying we need to store something. So username is equal to this other variable get, which is when you put things in the URL of the web page, you can get it, and we say get, and then these brackets just means we're pulling something out of an array. So I can show you how you can do an array. We'll just make an array. Rat array. Actually, it can be named anything. My array is equal to an array. So an array is just a place to hold stuff. So it's saying it's a container. Basically, think of an array as a bunch of boxes. So we can put anything in the boxes there. So we can do my array, and we can set a certain position. So my array thing1 is equal to var my array. So it's nice about AppTown will do this completion thing for me. Thing2 is equal to var2. And if you go back to the page, you'll see nothing's happening because PHP is just code that's running on the server. To see any result of anything we do in PHP, we have to send it back to the web page. So, and also you have to have this web server running. If this web server is running, your code will never work. Basically, WAMP or whatever server you're using is taking the code, and executing the code, and if the code isn't sending anything back to the web page, you get nothing. But if the code is sending something back to the web page, if this server isn't on, you'll also get nothing because nothing's there to be sent. So right now we have, so we can just say echo is the basic command, which means send something to the web page. That's what echo is. We can echo a var. We can say send var, whatever that is. Refresh the page. It says Mikey now. And then we can do echo var2. And it says Mikey with a number right after it. And you always have to think what we're sending is HTML code. So if we want it to be formatted the way we want, if you just send this, we're literally just sending text. And if you just send text to HTML, so right here this is a PHP block. So I can just, up here above it, the PHP block is HTML. So I can just write here, I can write a bunch of stuff, and that stuff will show up. But to make things look nice, you have to format it. So with HTML, you format things by putting tags around them. So open, close, what is this? It's not bracket, right? It's
left and right arrow.
Left, right, yeah, whatever. So this thing that's on the screen is a way I can say, I'm going to send you something that's formatting, and the letter P denotes paragraph, so format it like a paragraph. So take this stuff here, instead of just sending it as text, send it as a paragraph. And now it puts nice spacing before and after it. So this is how HTML works, and all our PHP is doing is sending HTML to the browser, so we can format these stuff the way we want. I guess another thing I should show you is concatenate. This is the thing you'll see all over the place. That means if you want to send, instead of sending var and then var2, that's kind of slow, I can just do echo var, and then I put a dot after it, which means, and concatenate that with var2. So basically put those two together and then send them. So now we get the same result. My key 10 is still there, but I'm doing it by this concatenate character. That's what that little dot is outside of quotes. It just means concatenate. So grab whatever's here, combine it with that thing, and then echo the result out. And this is how we send stuff that looks nice to the browser. So instead of sending var, we can say this echo the beginning paragraph tag, put a dot, so send that first, and then send the name of the variable we want, and put a dot, and then send the closing thing saying, okay, we're done with our paragraph. And now my key shows up its own paragraph, and I can do the same thing here with var2.
So that's literally just like concatenating the
Yeah.
formatting with it?
Yeah.
Why
So
does it have to like concatenate with it? I guess it's just like convention, whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could do it like this. You could say like var format equals, so the little single quotes means start a string. So you can send this, concatenate with the first var, and then concatenate with the second var. And then we can just send the thing that looks nice already. So send var format, because I mistyped it.
Also, that second P needs a slash.
Which one?
The in var format.
Oh yeah, whoops. Yeah, so it's just basically a language construct. So you could do it this way, but it's a little bit faster to just say, okay, we'll just smash these things together in the way of like we're doing with var2. And I think this is a good basic to kind of like, here's what's going on in PHP. Like, this will explain most of what we're doing. Like, we don't do very complicated stuff most of the time. It's a lot of, if you look at trial types or like login, it's a lot of require code dot header. That means this variable here is we figured out earlier where the folder that contains the code is. So require the file header inside of the code folder. So literally what's being sent is this to the browser. The interpreter, it's wherever the code folder is, which means dot dot means go up a level, then go to code, and then write header PHP. So that is effectively what we're telling the browser here, but we do it with these concatenates because it's simpler, and we can put this code. Basically, we can figure out where the code folder is relative to us, and then all we have to do is call, like, okay, go to the code folder and then give us this file from that folder. Or title is equal to preparing the experiment. And then, I mean, this is not indicative of what the code usually looks like. This is a big messy array. So we'll get into that.
It looks like that.
Well, when you write it, so when I write it, it looks like stuff like this. Like path is equal to up. So that's a variable we declared saying this is the string for going up a level in the folder. So dot dot forward is what we're sending. So we're saying dot dot forward, data folder. So data subfolder, which in this case, if it's not debug, it's nothing. And then extra data folder, I don't know what that's.
Also nothing.
Also nothing. So this is what we're sending them. A string that looks like this. Up data. So that's how we get to the data folder. But we had to do all these complicated looking things because stuff is changing. Like if you're in debug mode, the data subfolder will change to a folder called debug. Right now it's nothing, so we send nothing. So we're saying go up, send to the data folder, combine with nothing, and then combine with nothing again. But really we're just saying how do we get to the data folder is what we're trying to do. So this is variables, this is echoing stuff, and then I think the biggest thing to talk about are arrays, because arrays are how we do almost everything else in this program. Like, because we were talking about earlier, if I declare a variable here like var Mikey on this page, if I go to login and try to use var, it won't be equal to Mikey anymore. It won't exist anymore. It only exists for the page you're on. That's true for everything except for this variable, underscore session.
And that's only true when you have specifically asked for a session variable using session start.
Yeah, so you have to do session start, which you don't usually see because we put it in we kind of hid it away somewhere, but on almost every page that has this, if it has...
yeah, there's a file called initiate collector that we require at the top of the page, and that loads a lot of our default settings and custom functions and stuff.
Yeah.
And that also actually takes care of a lot of our HTML headers. So...
basically, it does a lot of stuff that you don't want to have to do a bunch of times.
Yeah, that it happens basically on every page because it's needed on every page. One of the things that it does is open up that session variable for you to share across pages.
Yeah, so if you see initiate collector at the top, that means, okay, I can store stuff in session. So the reason we end up using arrays everywhere is because session is itself equal to an array. So session's an array that can store pretty much anything we want. So we put everything in arrays. And the way you access stuff in arrays, so we can have a default array. Just an array that I'm just naming a default. It's not a special thing. I'm just giving it that name. So usually you can put things in arrays in two ways. You can do it how I did it here, where you say, this is an actual key. So we're saying, in this array, in this named position, put var. So if we echo that thing, we can say echo my array thing 1, and that will send out whatever var was, which I think in this case was Mikey. Oops. Wait, what did I do? Oh, I put a $, didn't put anything after it. PHP does not like me to do that. So wait, let me get rid of stuff that doesn't need to be here anymore. It's confusing. So that's the only thing I'm echoing, right? Yeah. So now it just sends Mikey because I'm saying, okay, echo whatever's in the array in the position this. Or I can say, thing 2 is the other thing that I want to echo. Or I can send both of them and I can say, okay, send Mikey, or whatever's in that position, I can change it to, oh man, I botched Courtney's spelling, well, let's stick with it. exort me. So I can
Much
send.
more badass.
Yeah, that's when you become like a skateboarder. So I can do this. I can say send the name and then send the second thing, or to make it formatted nicely, I can put a dollar and then say okay, put a space in between them. So name, put a space, and then second thing, format it.
Can you just print the whole array?
So
What
there
happens if
is.
you just do echo my array without indexing anything?
It should just say one, I think, is what it says.
I think it'll say, yeah, array. And
Oh, it just says array. Okay, so when you want to send an array, this is actually a nice thing. So I included custom functions. So we have built a bunch of stuff into collector that we've figured out we needed all over the place. So if you go into custom functions, it's probably the scariest file we have.
most awesome file.
Yeah, scariest for everybody. But the point is, there's a bunch of stuff in here, but the thing you really will find useful is this specific function called readable, which is meant to print an array in a way that we can actually like make some sense of. So I can just, oh yeah, the dot dot or slash slash space means this line is a comment, don't run that code. So I can just say readable, so a function readable, so that's how you call a function. You just, no dollar sign, you just say function name, and then you put the parens open and close. And what readable takes is it asks for an array. So if you just run readable and then give it an array, it'll give you this. Oops, that's not the browser. Untitled array, and then it'll show you thing1 is equal to exortney, thing2 is 10.
And there's also the function var_dump, which if you're doing PHP and you don't have access to the collector functions, it does something sort of similar. You can put anything inside var_dump. You can put integers or strings or arrays or objects.
Yeah, so here's var_dump. So there's, shows you a bunch of stuff.
And then just the notation here, if you get confused by it.
The
So
code?
the thing on the left of the, oh no, in the
yeah,
output.
okay.
So you've got thing1 with the equals arrow to the string. So it's just sort of thing1 is the address that if you access my array thing1, that's what you get. And so each of those just point to the individual outputs of exort me and 10.
Yeah, and see, PHP figured out what type of thing they are too. That says, oh, this is a string. You didn't have to tell it. It says, we assume it's a string because it looked like a string. This one's an integer because it looks like an integer. So there's var_dump. But if you're in collector, you probably have readable. And I specifically, on this Tinker page, included all of our custom functions. So anything you can use here, you'll be able to use in collector because it's the same functions. And if you ever need a function, PHP, well, Google things like, PHP, combine, pipe, or yeah, combine delimited. So there's something that's delimited, join array elements with a string. Again, that's php.net is awesome. It's called implode, and it'll say, okay, string, so you write implode, give it the string, give it the glue, so what are the things that, glue is string, right?
Yeah.
So give it the string, and then you tell how do you break the pieces apart, and there's a bunch of examples like array is equal to array this stuff, comma separated equals to implode, put a comma between them, and then all the array elements. And comma separated is now an array itself.
No, comma separated should be string.
Oh yeah, it's a string, sorry.
So it's one string with all of those
Commas between all the
attributes.
pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, php.net is an awesome place to just look up functions. You don't understand, like, if you see someone using implode, like, oh, there's implode, and here's a page for it. Or the opposite, when you have a string and you want to put it back into an array, explode is the opposite of that. And so most of this stuff is achieved through like Google, basically explain what you're trying to do, and then type into Google, and it'll probably be on php.net or Stack Overflow, which are just, so php.net is the official PHP documentation. Stack Overflow is a place where people can ask questions and other people post answers. You'll see if you look through the code enough, we have stuff mentioning like, oh, this was on Stack Overflow and it just worked.
Yeah, we give credit to Stack Overflow because it's a source of a lot of answers for us.
Yeah, so Stack Overflow is really nice. And another way to put things into arrays is this. So right here, this thing specifically points at it. You can also just do this. So if we just do the open close brackets and put nothing in them, that just means put it in the next available position. So like in my array, add var to that array. And you can look what that looks like. Wait, I turned off the readable.
And at the beginning, when you're loading like the order procedures into
It's sort of like that. Actually, we can even show you exactly what happens. But we have to do it. We don't do it exactly because we don't want to start at 0.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're loading everything in, we do it like this.
Right. So arrays by default will start counting at 0. So the first address is 0, and then 1, and it goes up. But since we're reading from Excel files, our first row is called row 1 in the Excel file, but even row 1 is actually our headers, and the actual data starts on row 2. So
yeah, so we do trials, $trials is equal to count minus 1. So because we're trying to line it up, Excel starts at row 2, right? Like the first row that we have data in. So for the first trial, we look at row 2 in Excel, and we store it in position 2 minus 1.
Mm-hmm.
So the second row in Excel gets stored as the first trial. So yeah, that's how we do it there. We just say count minus 1. So trials, whatever, basically trial 1, which is row 2, is equal to procedure, and then we just go to the procedure file and give us whatever's in the second position, because the second position is where it lines up with Excel. So yeah, the weird little like tricks we kind of had to do to make Excel formatting work. There's a little bit of bouncing there, but from your end, I mean, you don't really have to worry about it. But lots of times, if you just want to save things into an array, like you don't really care what position, you want to use something like later, say in array. I know Tyson doesn't like in array. And this is also another reason I like to use things like Aptana or other IDEs or integrated development environments. They give you little hints like this, so I don't have to remember exactly. If I just start typing in underscore, it says, oh, the function is called in array. Click it, it gives it to me. And then it also gives me the names of what the function needs. So it's a needle and haystack. So I'm looking for export. Oh, now I got it right. So I'm looking for that thing inside the haystack of my array. So saying, can you find, and then this just returns true, right?
Yep. So if you echo it, you should see 1, which is the string version of true.
Turn that off. Argument 1 for readable. Oh wait, do I still have readable? Turn it on. Oh, there we go. 1.
Right. So it's not. So yeah, Mikey said earlier that PHP you don't have to worry about types. That's why we don't have to set int and stuff. But PHP will still store a little bit of data about each of these variables. So there are
equals.
Right, and then just it'll do various things. For example, if something is equal to like the Boolean value of true, and you say echo out that value, it won't write true on the screen. It will convert whatever variable you have into a string format before sending it to the browser. So integers are really easy. If you have 10, then that just becomes the character 1 and 0. Strings go forward straight out, but that's why we had the problem with the array, because an array couldn't straightforwardly be changed into a string unless we used that implode function. And then a true value becomes 1, and actually a false value becomes an empty string, 0 characters, like nothing at all. It doesn't become 0, so it can be a little confusing there.
Oh, so the reason to show you things like this is kind of what you'd want to do. So here's some array. Let's say you're storing things in an array somewhere. So, important equals an array. You just somewhere, and then you're saying important Tupsum, close enough to Tyson. So add here are some important people. Courtney. Oops, sorry.
Courtney gets an index?
No, Courtney gets no index. So, wow, watching spelling all over the place. Let's see if I can nail my own name.
Do you work at Starbucks?
Let's see, I'm going to stick my key. Boom, even the caps are right. Okay, so I stored
Good job.
I stored all these things into the important array. So later I want to do something. The reason we store stuff is so we can use that information later. And most of the ways we want to use it is to do something conditional, like if we have this thing, do something with it. So when we start to get to conditional statements, the most useful ones are if and else. And they work as you kind of imagine, the way someone says if. So it's like if, and then I call open close paren, and I say if in array, so the needle I'm looking for, so if my key's in there, actually I'll leave it right there so it'll show something useful. So if my key's in the important array, then say echo my key is there. Else echo no my key. Sad face. No, don't complete that. That's a sad face. So now this code will only run if that Mikey is in that array. Basically, that means that if this returns true, effectively what it's saying is if in array Mikey important is equal to true. So sometimes you'll see some code that it just says if in array this, because effectively what the code is doing is saying if everything inside of these parens evaluates to true, then do this next statement. So we can just say in array, or we can say equal to true, but they'll both get the same answer. And we'll run this and we'll see. Oh, the one is still coming from where? Oh, because I did that. I need to delete the old code.
So if instead of
This is
the
no
Mikey
Mikey.
there, you could put
Like if you had correctly capitalized in array.
Yeah.
Mikey.
That's why I left it that way. Looking, so I can make it a
like
variable
current
called
answer or something, or one that they just
yeah.
typed in.
Mhm.
So that could be a variable.
So one way we have loaded all the time is this current trial. So you can look at current trial, which is an array, and you can say, okay, current trial procedure, which is a position in there, and then inside a procedure, each of the columns has a position. So we can say procedure answer. So we'll say looking for is equal to that thing, and then we say if the thing we're looking for, so instead of just Mikey, we put a variable in there. So if looking for isn't important, then we say, here's another way we can use smarter things. So instead of saying Mikey's not there, we can say the looking for is not there. So looking for and then concatenate with space is there or no.
So say like for every single trial, like if it's a correct answer, then okay, give me another one. But if it's not, then it's like takes them someplace else.
Yeah.
That's how you could do it right here.
Yeah. So this is kind of the basics of PHP, which will do most of what you need to do. Like a lot of look at what they responded to and then check if it's one of these other things. So imagine you have like an array. So we'll just wipe all this out. You have an array called like past is equal to an array. And then every time they give an answer, you say past. And because we set up the alias of Q for you already, so you can use that as the key. So that's how I can find it. So whatever trial they're on, the Q will be set as the word Q. So past Q is equal to response, I think is how we save it in there. So whatever the response was they gave, stored it in an array called past, and use the key Q to find it later. And then we just do this for every trial they run, and then in the future we can say if, just pretend. So if current trial, current trial stimuli, what am I doing? Current trial stimuli Q. So that's the thing we're looking for. So I'll make it so here's how I like to do it. Is equal to. So that's the thing we're looking for.
In this case, you'd use an if is set, right?
Yeah, if it's
Q
set.
is the key.
Or you can do in an array, right? It'll also just return false. So if it's in the array, so if we have
Oh, right.
the thing we're looking for in the array of past, then we'll just say we'll overwrite answer is equal to past of the thing we're looking for. So we're looking for the current queue. We usually say, give me the queue for the current thing we're on.
Mm-hmm.
And now if the queue for the thing we're on is in the past array, then set the answer equal to whatever they responded to last time.
Mm-hmm.
So answer is equal to past and whatever the current queue is, which is stored in there somewhere.
So if you're going to try to like have them study something that they generated
Yeah.
earlier, exactly.
And what you have to remember is every time if you're doing stuff like past is equal to this, at the very bottom of that page where you're doing stuff, you'd say session past is equal to the variable you set. So basically save the stuff you just did. And at the top of the page, you'd probably do this because you also want to know. You just flip it. You say past is equal to session past. So basically at the beginning of each page, you say, okay, load up whatever I had stored before as past. So we don't have to declare it as an array anymore because it just gets that. And then we say, okay, the queue is equal to the current, for the position queue, store the response. And then if we have another response for it already, look it up here. But generally, this is how you do stuff. You just have to remember that if you want to keep it later, it has to at some point go on that page, go into session, because if not, it'll just disappear. And every time you get to the page, past will be declared brand new.
So here, yeah, it's just assigning whatever past ends up as
to be
basically a thing, yeah.
Take whatever you have and store it here as this variable past, add things to it, and then overwrite the state of past with whatever it currently is. So it's like grab it, update it, and then put it back in the holder. And this is, for the most part, I think the kind of coding people would actually need to do to
Yeah.
It's a lot of just oh, if it's this, I want to change it. Or imagine if you have conditions, you'd say if I think you can just do we set up at the top of these pages aliases to make it easier for you. So we do stuff like session trials, because technically this is how you should get to everything. Session trials, 4 or 5 is equal to a trial 5 stimuli Q, and we do this basically. We say Q is equal to that. So then you don't have to directly mess with this stuff. You just say, oh, I can use Q, which is the same way we say current trial is equal to and this is actually another, instead of 5, we actually have this. So we're saying, okay, we're keeping track of the position inside of session. So set current trial equal to the session trials, whatever current position we're on. And that's how you can just do something like current trial stimuli answer. But essentially, you're navigating the same big tree. We're just kind of putting in shortcuts for you to get to certain critical points where most people care about. Usually what you do is something like this, like procedure. I gotta spell procedure right. New call. So you have some new column and you want to be like, okay, if the procedure's new column is equal to this thing I set, then do it this way. If not, do it the other way. Switch the queue with the answer. If it's, the new column says reverse, then you say, okay, set the queue to the answer and then score it differently or something like that. But this is most of what you're going to be doing. And some of these we actually do, was it and ampersand, right? That's how we do it by referent. So equal to actually, it makes a copy of this value and sets it equal to that thing. Sometimes what we do is use equal ampersand, which means don't actually make a copy, just make this point to the big session array. So you can actually update the values, like just being like q is equal to thing. For something you want to overwrite q, you could do that, and it would go back into the big array, find the place you're supposed to be, and then overwrite what q is. But let's talk about trial types. I think this is, I don't know, do you think there's more PHP we should talk about? This is a good like primer to PHP.
Yeah, most fun to learn by doing.
Yeah, PHP is a lot of like try it, mess with it. That's why this Tinker file is really useful. So you open it up and it'll look like this. So if you want to try to make a trial type, you can just start saying, okay, I'm going to have a paragraph at the top. It's going to say some things. Then I want to make a box. It's called a div. Maybe I'm going to put another paragraph there. Q. And then I'm going to put an ordered list. And then put some list items in there. Keys. So lots of HTML is just sort of thinking like this, like, okay, some keys and banana. Watch the spelling on that too. And then you look at the page, and it'll say, oh, what do we get rid of? Oh, there's what I typed. Header. So like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want it to look like this. So you kind of mess with the HTML so it looks like what you want to do, and then I would just go into the PHP and start, echo. And start saying, okay, so echo a p tag, and then I want to put a variable in there, and then I close the p tag. Oops. So that'll kind of do that part. No, go outside. And then you kind of just build your way back. So that's usually how I tend to build trials from scratch. Is like, I know what I want them to look like with HTML, and now how to figure out to do that same thing in PHP. So I'll just grab all this, can make it a comment. Now time to do control / and it comments things out. So that goes away, and then I can say, okay, well, q isn't set, so I need to set q is equal to something, right? Q is equal to text.
I like this little tinker space. It's nice.
Yeah, it's a good place to just kind of like try to do it. Something. Okay, the top thing is showing up where I want it to show up. I kind of figure out building out things and then keep messing with it. And it has all the functions you can use that we have built, plus you already have access to all the PHP stuff.
Probably the easiest way to really work with stuff is just to copy paste one of the trial types that's already existing.
Yeah.
And try and edit it to fit what you wanted. So, for example, to make like the Q trial type.
I'm going to give it to you, Tyson.
Wait.
Should be on your screen, I think. There you go.
Yeah, so if you wanted to make a new trial type, which just basically showed the Q right on the screen, but had a border around it or something. Right? So you can just look at the Q thing, and it's got some basic code in here. And then to edit it, it's just a matter of copy paste. Got a new file now. Let's see, Q container. Yeah. Let's just give it a border. Is it too small?
Like 4 pixels.
What's that?
Oh yeah, I was just saying the border also make the border bigger just so it shows up easier.
Okay.
So Tyson remembers these things. I never remember any of the CSS commands. So here's what I would do every time I need to do something. I just type. So what he's doing is CSS is the styling. I just say CSS border, and there's a link saying here's border properties and here's things you can do, and then here's examples: border style, border width. So if it's a styling thing and how it looks, you just type CSS and whatever it is you're trying to do. Somebody at the web has done it, and otherwise, you can try to remember it like Tyson does, but I never remember the CSS.
Sort of matter of that organic memory versus electronic memory.
Yeah.
But, eventually, as you do it over and over and over, you can't help but learn it as desperate as you want to keep it in your Google memory instead.
Mine's firmly in the Google verse.
Right. And then let's do the background color.
Green.
I always forget if it's red, blue, green, or red, green, blue.
I don't know. I just go to CSS color picker. Here's another one. There we go. Here, while Tyson's trying to remember a hex code for a color, CSS color picker. So the colors are weird. You can't just give it like a descriptive name. So here's a color picker. So you can just click on the thing and it gives you the code. Or you can do, that's kind of a bad color picker. Here's a better one. Colorpicker.com. Who would have thought it? You can slide this thing around and be like, okay, I really want, what are you going for, Courtney? Green?
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, green is
Very
the
nice
second
green.
one. Okay.
Green, okay, so then
What do you want?
this gives us the color is equal to 79C3EB. Oh man, why do they make that text so small? Oh, there's 793EB, I
Of course,
believe.
you can also.
Oh, no, 34B02E.
Is the screen yours or mine?
It is probably on mine because I was on color picker while you were typing hex codes.
Okay.
You're back.
I think it's generally also fine to just do that if you don't feel like using that codes. Okay, so now we've got Q border, which should just show the Q, and then once again we can just go to the trial tester, which should be a nice solution for letting you just tinker around with code. So let's just take a look at what Q did normally. Okay, so this is what we normally got with Q. Now let's try refreshing the page to make sure that Q border. What? There's no new trial type. Oh,
It's on the bottom.
way down here. Okay, the green's kind of a dark green, but there you go. You've got some nice styling, and basically we just tinkered with something that already existed. So hopefully, just you can even use this to help you look through things to find something that looks similar to what you want, and then once you find it, you can just start editing that. And this will be upgraded in the future, but you can tinker around with anything you want here. You can put some more PHP in.
Yeah, that's the other thing. So we're showing you trial types that right now they're strictly like display, but you can run code. Like you can just declare PHP and be like, okay, look up the answer for this trial type. If it's longer than 5 characters, set this word equal to something. You want them to remember longer, whatever, strings, or for some reason you want to do a check. You can run code in there, figure out a bunch of things, and then at the bottom just display, okay, here's what I figured out.
Right, so either the tinker area for just really quickly fiddling with new functions or something, or if you're trying to make something show up with various cues, you can use the trial tester, which will be upgraded to also let you figure out how your scoring is being done and help you work with that. So, yeah. A lot of complicated stuff in the programming. We try and tuck away into files that you can use without worrying about how they're doing it, although you can look at it if you want. But the stuff that you're actually interested in doing to make the most immediate changes to get just the experiment you're trying to make should mostly be just a matter of editing Excel files, which are too complicated. And then if you need to change any of the trial types, the files are all pretty small, localized, and they should be easier to tinker with than any of the bigger files.
Yeah, and
pretty small file, less than 20 lines.
If you want to mess with trial types, I would try to stay away from messing with the trial types that take a lot of input. So MC-pick, show them what MC-pick looks like. I think we showed it earlier, but so we're showing you trial types that are pretty basic, like we accept one thing and then we do it one way. But there you can get very complex. So if Tyson's gonna pull up MC-pick. So MC-pick is declaring its own functions. It's checking a bunch of things. It's trimming and exploding things.
And then it gets nested wonderfully right down here.
So technically, trial types are just they're meant ideally for just messing with display. But you can also run a bunch of code on them, and you can say, take whatever the queue is, rejigger it in some way. Like let's say you have a queue that's certain letters and you want to scramble it. You can say, okay, grab the queue, break it into 3-letter chunks, explode the chunks into an array, shuffle that array. Now save that as the new queue. So if you want to have some weird, like, force them to generate what their word is,
Engrams,
yeah, the engrams type stuff, you can basically make the program do the breaking apart of the engrams and reshuffling them. So you don't have to think of it as just like, oh, I give it a display and it gives me whatever is in the Q column and the answer column, or whatever columns you add, because you can add 5 more columns to your stimuli and you can still reference them. Like, give me whatever's in new stimuli 3, and that'll be a value. But you could do lots of stuff. Like, those new stimuli columns could be parameters that feed a function that takes the Q and does something to it, and ultimately you're displaying something. Or even not. Like, I'm thinking of building trial types that don't show anything, but things like a criterion test. Like, you give it a number that'll say how many trials back am I looking at, and a parameter about adding and dropping trials, whether or not to drop incorrect trials or correct trials. And it'll go back, look at a bunch of trials, modify the session variable, and do nothing else, and then just keep going. So you could basically use it as an area to inject code. You can think of it that. Because that's literally how the program sees it. It sees it as we are injecting code into the program. It just happens to be that the code is meant, or is mostly right now meant to be how to display the trial, but it doesn't have to be. So where is it doing the injection? I'm looking inside of... Here it is. Okay, so I'll jump over mine. So from the code's point of view, here's what's happening. Unselect Tyson, yeah. Back on my Infinity. So we're saying if trial file, which just means trial file is we search for it, and if we found it, then we say include trial file, which means go to the trial file and run that code right now. And that's what it's doing. So you can think of trial file as just a place to inject code into the program. Although most people don't use it that way, but when you get to more advanced things, it's oftentimes easier to kind of write a little bit of code to do sort of a really complicated thing than to try to build a trial type that will show it in a complicated way. It's like easier to just like keep track of this for me. What else is there, Tyson? Is there much else to talk about today?
No, although I guess next week we should actually do the actual building of trial types, actually making some custom response scoring.
Make a 2-session thing, and if we want to talk about that.
Yeah, we could.
We did do a little bit of 2-session last week, but...
Oh yeah, you didn't see the new 2-session stuff, right?
Yeah.
You can add a delay now. You can say time is equal to 2 hours, and if they come back, it says, oh, you can't go yet.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
But it's actually really simple now. The 2-session stuff is way easier than it used to be. And it's way more flexible, and basically the experiment treats it as when we're done, we freeze whatever's going on, we save everything we have in memory, and when we come back, we load everything back into memory, and the experiment keeps running. So you can save stuff in session at experiment 1 or at session 1, and they'll be there in session 2. Anything else worth showing today? I feel like you can make this not a 2-hour video for once. I realize even though we weren't on a set schedule, they're almost all just under 2 hours, like an hour 57, an hour 58. I think it's my natural point of like, ugh. My enthusiasm deflates at around the 2-hour mark. Today without coffee, maybe that's.
So I came in partly through.
I guess what else do we
Hello?
want to see? What else do we want to do? Because I'm trying to think how much more people want to know. I think we've shown them the basics, and you can do a lot of stuff. But
Maybe more about the flow.
the flow, okay. That's the part that got a little bit more complicated, and all the documentation is way out of date. But we can show you how.
Because you mentioned, like, so doing trial types is one way to kind of interrupt and do some programming, but then you could also do that, like, with Next, right?
Next is gone. Next isn't
gone.
wait, no.
Okay.
Next exists, right?
Right. You go there just for a second to record data and pop back
Right.
into
Yeah.
trial.
But you could also do other things there, so that could be another way to interrupt.
Yeah.
So people might want to think about whether that's the best way or a trial type is the best way
Yeah.
to do it.
Although what we could do, so right now the way it works is each trial type is defined by a scoring file and a trial type display file. We could add another file at next, which basically when we hit next, we would include whatever arbitrary code you'd like to execute, right? And just run. And basically for each trial type, we're like, well, if it has in its folder something called next, then when we get to next.php, run this code. And that would be a nice
For all the conditional stuff.
Yeah.
It'd be really good.
injection point of
Yeah.
like, figure out something for me or compare this to a past answer as well.
So I'm just like thinking otherwise, even though you could always keep the little pairs of trials together or make it like a post trial or something. Yeah, I guess you could just make it a unique post trial for like conditional stuff. But
or you could just make it always go to post trial 1 and 2, and post trial 1 would just check if the condition was set in this one, do I run?
Yeah.
And then if not, do nothing. And then the other one would say, oh, okay, is the condition set? So essentially it would go trial, post trial, trial, post 1, post 2, but only one of the 2 posts would ever happen because the post 1 could check, like, am I supposed to be going? No, okay, don't do anything. Just go to post 2. And post 2 be like, am I supposed to be going? No, okay, go to next. Actually, yeah, it's... So post isn't really a page anymore. Trial's looping on itself.
Yeah.
Which gets a little weird. But everything is running from trial.php. Like trial.php is sending data back to itself and writing that data. And then when it goes to post, it just sends back to trial and it updates a variable saying, okay, I'm supposed to be at post now. And then if there's a post there, it runs. And if there isn't, it looks for the next post until it finds one or fails to find one and then says, okay, well, I'm the next trial then.
Post trials are basically just another trial, and the only difference is that the output is stored on the same row. But you can put, MC pick as an original trial or a post trial, and they run exactly the same.
Yeah.
Maybe that should be like a topic for next time. But
okay. Yeah.
I don't know. It's getting late.
Yeah, let's wrap it up. I'm getting tired. I need coffee. I'm supposed to tutor somebody in half an hour. All right, go team. Break.
People have ideas for trials.